Yeah, welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. We continue our deep dive into the internal saga of the Athletics Association of Guyana. Last week, we heard from President Aubrey Hudson as he addressed several allegations, including, but not limited to, administrative improprieties, underwriting AAG expenses, and then reimbursing himself without the council's knowledge and or approval. We then heard from General Secretary James Cole, who shared his viewpoint on a number of issues, including the overdue annual general meeting and voting Congress.
Meeting of the association will happen. We will now have to engage all clubs of the association, all financial clubs of the association, because it's the club who has the responsibility of the deciding factor, how do we move forward. So we will engage the clubs and put forward to them that we will seek an extension to hold AGM probably sometime in February. We cannot unilaterally as a council decide upon holding election because we go past the date, so we will have to engage all stakeholders, which are the clubs of the association.
Yeah, James Cole, the General Secretary of the Athletics Association of Guyana. Now that we have heard from two key internal personnel, today we turn to journalist Raul Tony to get an understanding of the ongoing debacle from outside the walls of the AAG. Raul, welcome to the SportsMax Zone. It's really a pleasure to have you on today. How are you doing?
I'm fine, and Happy New Year's to you guys as well too. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, it is great to have you. Rob, what do you make of what is happening with the Athletics Association of Guyana?
You know, I'm happy that you guys have been covering this, as you rightfully pointed out, this debacle in its entirety, because for far too long, well, as of recent times, with the whole issue with, between Mr. Hudson and his executive, they've been hiding behind the shadows of the success of more so our junior athletes and the fact that they've been doing considerably well on the regional and international stage. Quite frankly, I watched both shows and rewatched both interviews that both Mr. Hudson and Mr. Cole would have done on SportsMax. And I must say that you guys would have done your homework, because all the questions you would have asked both Mr. Hudson and Mr. Cole are questions that either of us here in Guyana definitely would have asked. And I know there's a lot of truth to it. You know, it's very sad that the AAG is going through this, what I would want to call a turmoil, at a point where they have some of the budding stars within the region, particularly in Malachi Austin and Tiana Springer, and they're unable to really focus on what's happening around track and field in Guyana right now. You know, the expansion of more facilities being built, the relationship that they would have developed with the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport, the financial support that they've been getting from the government of Guyana through the ministry, and also the Guyana Olympic Association. And also, you know, they have a little change that's happening right now with the National Schools Championship. And I believe that a time would have been right for the AAG to really focus most of the attention that they've been getting to really administer the sport of track and field properly, rather than fighting amongst themselves. You know, Mr. Hudson said that, you know, he believed that it's a witch hunt. But I could tell you, having covered track and field over the last 2 decades in Guyana, that what we're seeing now is nothing new that's been happening in the sport. Most of it happened under Mr. Hudson's tenure. It's just that now there's more access to information and everything is more readily available thanks to the internet, that everything is being exposed in real time.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about the level of concern that you are feeling, especially from, let's say, the ministry, the government as a whole, the Olympic Committee in Guyana.
There is a level of concern. Now, Mr. Hudson, you asked a question about the ministry's involvement, and Mr. Hudson played it off as though, you know, they're trying to bully their way or bulldoze their way in track and field. In fact, if I might add, and I hope I don't come over as a sportsman for the minister or the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport, but just being honest, you know, if it wasn't for the government of Guyana and the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport and the National Sports Commission, the chaos that derived from Mr. Hudson and some of his executive lackluster approach and dishonest approach to track and field when we had those athletes stranded and had to turn up late from missed meets and events and so forth at the Carifta Games in the Bahamas. When you look at what happened then, and then when the government actually came in and ensured that the team was fully funded, the Olympic Association came in and ensured that they were fully funded, and you saw a smooth flowing of track and field under the tenure of the acting president, Miss Hermenstein. So when you look at that, you have to be concerned and say, okay, fine, what's really happening here? But I really can't blame Mr. Hudson. Neither could I blame the AAG in its entirety. But I have to blame the affiliated clubs at the AAG. What you're seeing now is nothing new, and most of the people that are involved in track and field some have been around longer than I have even been in this profession. My mother was a national athlete for Guyana. The same thing happening now happened in her time as well too, and a number of athletes that we saw falling by the wayside because of the AAG's inability to properly manage and administer the sport in Guyana.
Yeah, one of the things we were trying to ascertain when we spoke with Jensek Cole last week was whether there were individuals who were interested in running the AAG. And he said, obviously, because no notice has gone out yet, that there were no candidates at this stage. But he also suggested that quite likely, as soon as the notice goes out, then you may have a number of persons stepping forward to say, I want to run. From what you have gleaned on the ground, are there persons chomping at the bit to run the Athletics Association of Guyana?
Actually, there is, there are a number of people who would want to put their hands up to say, hey, I want to be president of the AAG. And very good people as well, too. Good administrators themselves, professional people themselves, just like Mr. Hudson is a very good professional in his personal capacity. But I would question why Mr. Hudson would want to return to the helm of track and field, but I would also question why the clubs would want Mr. Hudson to return to the helm of track and field in Guyana. We've had many issues where under the tenure of, the current AAG president, who I might tell is a good gentleman. I share a personal relationship, but I just like to be honest. It's my job. We should have been hosting the 50th edition of the Carifta Games, and had Mr. Hudson been honest to himself and the government of Guyana and the people of Guyana, we would have hosted those games as well too. That too is enough to say, okay, fine, let's find new leadership. You find...
When you say if he had been honest, you would have been hosting the 50th Carifta Games. Expound on that a little more.
Well, I know quite a lot, and I need to be very careful because a lot was said to me in confidence as a journalist, so I really don't want to throw anyone under the bus. But I will say this as much so you could get a gist of where I'm coming from, that Mr. Hudson knew that we wasn't going to host the 50th edition of the Carifta Games. Yesterday, he was egging people on here in Guyana, the government more so, about us hosting the games. I will share this much. I can remember when I was covering this story, and I reached out to the government and said, hey, this is what I heard from Mr. Hudson, and they showed me from their side that, look, we know nothing of this. This is our last correspondence we would have had with Mr. Hudson. And I was like, okay, so why is this man saying, oh, we stand a chance of hosting this game? Are we going to host the 51st edition? Because we are of the opinion here in Guyana that being a founding member of Carifta itself, where the Carifta Games divulged from in the 1970s, Guyana should have been a host of these games a long time ago, let alone hosting the 50th edition of the games. Mr. Hudson knew that from very early on that we were not going to host these games, and he should have been honest. I'll say this as much, he should have been honest with the people of Guyana, saying, look, we're going to try to host a next edition of the Carifta Games.
Yeah, and Raul, at the start of the interview, you spoke about the youngsters and, how they've been hiding behind their successes. But my main question to you is, based on what you've observed and, of course, your work as a journalist, have you noticed if what is happening within the Hudson administration has been affecting the sport in the country?
Luckily, under the Hudson administration, after he was out on that quote-unquote suspension, you had the his assistant stepped up and was doing a very, very good job. What I respect and liked about her is that, it doesn't take much to her to reach out to anyone that she believed that could help advance the cause of the AAG to say, hey, could you help us in this X, Y, and Z? So what you found then is that you had a smoother operation of the AAG. You found that the AAG had a better relationship with government for the CRIFTA games, for the World Junior Championships, World Under 20 Championships, the South American Championships. So that issue that we had for funding running here and there, they didn't have that under Ms. Harmenstein. And when I said that they were hiding behind the success of these youngsters, AAG won some awards at the last National Sports Awards, and I could say that I sat on the panel for those sports awards along with some other esteemed journalists here in Guyana. And I would say this much: the AAG won the Association of the Year on the success of their primarily junior athletes, Tiana Springer, Malachi Austin, Narissa McPherson, and the list goes on, the success that we would have had at the Youth Commonwealth Games, the CRIFTA Games through Malachi and also Tiana, the World Junior Championship, the South American Youth Championships. They basically won those awards on the backs of the success of those youngsters. Hence me saying that they hid behind the calamity of the AAG, hid behind the success of those young athletes on the international stage.
But then, Raul, when an election comes and Aubrey Hudson, because he wants to be a part of the administration.
If an election happens this year.
Right, correct. Well, it has to come. I mean, we've been talking about it, but let's see if these discussions push them in any direction. Now, whenever this decides to happen and he puts his hand up, then of course he has these successes of these youngsters to of course push his campaign. And again, just like how you sat on that panel, and of course you couldn't dispute that they won that award.
Yeah, you couldn't dispute.
He can sit and say, well, under my administration, whether he was stepped away or then he came back, he has all these numbers to speak for himself. And they say
under his administration, but was he at the tenure of was he at the helm rather of the AAG? No. Right? As I mentioned, you saw a smooth functioning of the AAG. Now, like I said, Mr. Hudson is someone I have a very good relationship with sports media. He's never shied away from answering any questions, as he answered all of your tough questions, the same way in which he operates here in Guyana with the journalists and the media at large. So he's never shied away to say, oh, you can't ask me this or you can't ask me that. And he would be fair enough to say that he had absolutely nothing to do with some of the successes of our national teams that we would have had. Look, we haven't had a direct qualifier for the Olympics in quite some time. In fact, Alia Abrams was the only athlete to directly qualify for the Olympics in Tokyo. But she's been out there doing everything on her own, basically with little to no support from the AAG. This goes beyond Mr. Hudson as well. And I could call a number of athletes in the past that have been successful without the assistance of the AAG. In fact, I'll admit that I say to youngsters, sooner you could get out of Guyana, leave. Sooner you could get a scholarship to go to study and compete overseas, leave. If you could go base in Jamaica like Emmanuel Archibald did, it was good for him, because Emmanuel Archibald would have been wasting his talent here in Guyana, because we cannot cater for talents like Emmanuel Archibald, like Alia Abrams and our sister Jasmine Abrams, because our Athletics Association do not know how to cater to these elite athletes. So what you would find that while Mr. Hudson could say, yes, these success happened under the AAG, he wasn't anywhere part of it.
Yeah, we're running out of time, Rod, but I have two quick questions to ask you. One has to do with something you said just now about why would the clubs want to have Hudson be head of the association. He, on this show, when we interviewed him, spoke of people coming in to him and asking him to take control, and suggesting that he does have vital support for him continuing in the position. Can you explain that to us? Because from the outside looking in, it just seems to me as if most people think he should step aside, but the delegates and the people involved, and you hinted at it just now, he seems to have some support.
Yeah, so Lance, let me be quite honest with you. Everything is political here in Ghana, and I mean politics in every sense of the word. Some might believe that, okay, fine, if Mr. Hudson is there, the government would not step in and have their way and, would want to control the AAG. So they might say, look, we're trying to resist government interference in our sport, and Mr. Hudson might be the best man to defend our cause in making that a reality, rather. And then you might have the others might say, okay, fine, but when Mr. Hudson is not there, we're getting the support from government, we're getting corporate support. So why not keep Mr. Hudson away?
So you're suggesting Hudson is not an Irfan Ali man?
No. You caught me off guard there. What I'm saying is that some might believe that he would be better resistant to any interference or lack thereof, or what might be perceived as government interference coming from the ministry, the GOA, the National Sports Commission, and so forth. But if I'm to be honest, that's not the case, because I have a front row seat and an inside detail, rather, of how they operate and so forth. But I could truly say that, you know, everything has been happening with the best interest of those athletes at heart. Look, we've seen the president met with, but this is President Irfan Ali, would have met with a number of track and field athletes on a couple of occasions, and some of them would have received help. Lack thereof of any publicity and any PR from those engagements, because it wasn't done from a PR perspective, but from being there and what I know, a lot of athletes would have gotten help. Now, would that have happened under Mr. Hudson's tenure? I can't say, but has it ever happened under his tenure? No.
Yeah, and quickly, you were noted in your Kiter News work as a journalist, doing many stories as well on the Swimming Association issues as well, with swimmer Tyrrell, and the fact that the Sports Commission there disconnected with the association there. So in the past year, SportsMax has gone into two critically embarrassing administrative performances from your athletics and swimming associations. How worrying is it for you as a journalist to have to deal with these stories? Because the Guyana Swimming Association story was pretty embarrassing as well.
It was, and you guys basically touched the surface. I think I wrote in my column as well too that it took the government long enough. In fact, it took the GOA long enough. Ideally, I didn't agree with the National Sports Commission doing a joint statement with the Guyana Olympic Association. I think the Guyana Olympic Association had the perfect opportunity, being the custodian of that Olympic sport in Guyana, to really put their foot down firmly, and then the National Sports Commission should have came in to say they support the Guyana Olympic Association. Look, because they've been leveled many cases of sexual misconduct within swimming that hasn't been properly reported, because you have to be very careful when you're reporting on certain misappropriation or inappropriate actions in sport in general. But this has been a long overdue conversation in swimming. I'm happy that SportsMax would have touched on many of those issues, because you have people who have been accused of everything happening in swimming, and they're still actively involved in the sport, still actively being selected to coach national teams and so forth. And among young girls, these are topics that we don't touch here in Ghana because it's taboo, and nobody wants to really touch or march the current, as we say here in Guyana, on with administrators and so forth. But it was very embarrassing. It's embarrassing to the point where it is a born Guyanese migrated on scholarship in the US, and you're basically telling him that he got to jump through a bunch of loopholes. And when FINA, which is the governing body for the sport, doubled down and said, yes, he's eligible, you're still questioning if he's eligible or not. It's nepotism at its best, because you have coaches whose children are aligned to clubs who gets favoritism from GASA. Then you have an athlete who is on 2 FINA scholarship, hasn't been improving. So it's a rabbit hole in which we went down, and I really do hope that the conversation could keep going here in Guyana.
Yeah, and finally, Roll, from me, when was the last athletics AGM? Because we were told 2016 originally, but there appeared to have been a U-turn on that, and it may not have been 2016.
It was just around 2016. Mr. Hudson would be serving, I think, his 3rd or 4th tenure as president, so it has to be around 2016 as well.
Wow. All right. Rol, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and I'm sure we'll be chatting again in the coming weeks or months, because these issues, I figure, are not done, and we still have a lot of work to do. And together, I think we can do some great work. So we'll chat again soon.
Definitely. Thank you guys for having me.
All right. Lance Murray, you know that issue of sexual misconduct that Raul just brought up? And I have to be careful how I say this, because it's not a Guyana issue. It's a Caribbean issue. And it is an issue that is quite prominent in Jamaica as well, especially in track and field.
Right.
So many accusations. But I think you find that a lot of the young girls who endure a certain level of sexual misconduct, assault, however you want to look at it, a lot of them in the moment don't even realize that what is happening is wrong. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that many of them are afraid to speak up because of what they think are, potential repercussions. And then there's the other side of it, that for some of them, by the time they get older and they realize that what was happening was wrong, by then they have families and they don't want to revisit that part of their life. And so many of them, I think, try to protect those around them and closest to them. So if they have daughters and sons and so on, but they'll probably never open up to their families because they don't want to revisit it. But as Raul said, these are conversations that we don't have in the Caribbean because they're taboo. But maybe one of these days we'll have them on the SportsMax Zone.
I think we should. I just heard that, and to be honest, the paws on my hands, they raised because it's such a real issue, and just to think that somebody close to you might be going through that. I mean, and how many people are afraid to talk about it. I think, Ricardo, it's something that, I saw you wrote it on your paper, it's something that we probably need to start discussing.
Didn't know you were watching my paper so closely.
It's literally next to me, yes, this is it.
But
Do I
let's
show
go
them?
to a break.
Do you want to see viewers?